John, thanks for doing this. I'm
Hi.
excited to talk to you because I can just tell from the movies you've made, and also I've talked to a couple of the cast or one member of the cast, that your taste aligns very much with mine. And
Okay.
I want to hear you talk open really just about the legacy of Westerns and samurai movies, which is something I love, just the way they've intertwined through history, the way they feed each other, and you're
Yeah.
bringing them together in your own way, but I just want to open up the
Hmm.
floodgates on that for you and hear you talk about the why kind of that.
Who was the cast member you talked to? Are you allowed to tell me?
Wait, who did
Uh,
um
um,
I can't remember. I talked to
okay.
somebody and we were talking about hold on, let me check.
Yeah,
I do
I
a
don't
lot of
know.
these, so
Uh,
I
of course.
it was it was don't waste my time. Hold on, let me check. We're using
Okay.
time, but
Um, what was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, I was fascinated actually. Obviously I watched a lot of westerns to make Slow West.
yes.
And um, I watched a little bit of my first samurai films that I got into was the sort of Shogun Assassin and the bloodier ones and the sort of 70s sort of Lady Snowblood and then
Yeah.
slowly I started going back and discovering first of all Kurosawa and
Yeah.
um you know and then really going on a sort of deep dive with research for Tornado and watching everything from really early samurai films from the 30s and 40s right the way through to great lesser known ones like Sword of Doom, which I loved. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, I think that was a big influence. And then, and then reading up about it all and, especially reading about Kurosawa and the sort of, you realize that neither sort of genre came first. It was a sort of Kurosawa being influenced by John Ford, Sergio Leone being influenced by Kurosawa, and this kind of back and forth, which is
Yes.
interesting.
That's one of the things I love the most is when you read more about Kurosawa talking about his obsession with John Ford. And
Yeah,
then you see how Leone was in Kurosawa. And then you get people like you and Tarantino who are like taking it all and then weaving it
yeah,
together. So it was Takahiro who I spoke to, and
yes. I thought it might be Takeo.
he told me something interesting. He told me that you showed him a movie his father was in that he had never seen. So now it's all coming back to me. But like
I
it was
think,
like, and I was like, wait, I
yeah,
didn't know your dad was an actor. So I want to hear you
yeah,
talk. You went deep into the archives, I guess.
yes, I did. And I was doing my sort of, he was probably interviewing me in a way, to see whether he was going to take this or not. And I think that clinched it when he said, "Oh, my dad was in a samurai film called." Can't remember which one it was, and I was like, "Oh, this one," and took the DVD down, and he was like, "What?" Bootleg DVD that he had never knew existed. So uh,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of it's quite hard to track down even a lot of the samurai films. Yeah, they're not
Yeah.
all released, but they're yeah, that really interested me. I know that people had, and when you learn more about Kurosawa and the fact that he was kind of not necessarily loved in Japan because he was influenced in the West and the Western films, and that makes him the truly sort of universal director that puts him, up there, and I think that. Yeah, there'd been very little attempts at a samurai in the West. I think maybe was it Red Sun or something, or no, I can't remember.
There's been
Very
a couple times, but you
yeah,
kind of and Takahiro told me this too. He had this idea of why and how he got there. He got to
yes,
Scotland. And I
yeah,
like that the movie, one of the things that your movie reminds me of from Kurosawa in a sort of a structural way is it's a bit of a slow burn to get started. We're kind of
yeah,
introduced slowly, landscapes,
yeah,
situations, and the ingredients cook over time, you
yeah,
know. And I
absolutely.
don't know if you're influenced in some way. Like it's not the way a lot of movies don't work like that anymore. So I'm curious, you have an art school background too, I think. So I'm curious what very visually, there's all these frames in the openings of this
Hmm.
movie that are kind of like just very, beautiful on their own. That you're just kind
Yes.
of looking at like the way the grass is a very interesting looking movie.
Yeah, I think that my love of older movies, they do they don't have to tell everything up front, and the audience were maybe a bit more patient back then to sort of let things unfold. And I think things now with television, I think, has changed a little bit on how people view cinema because we're now expected to maybe know everything about all these characters. TV is a thing now of going back into their childhood and having an episode, and so to sort of when you look at something like A Fistful of Dollars now, um, you know this character just because it's been done a few times and we've had history to look back on it. But I think when that first came out, people might have been confused about how little you knew about this man with no name. You're not even told his name or where he's
Mm.
from, he's going. So I think maybe there's that, and with Takahiro, it's kind of like embracing the fact that um, we don't need to know where he's come from and where he's going. The most important thing is we need to know how he reacts with his daughter in that at that time, and how, he's a man struggling to teach his daughter the right things. He thinks he's teaching his daughter the right things, like his samurai mantras and how to use a sword, but he's not really asking the questions, what is it that you want and what is it that you need?
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. And there's kind of what cultural inheritance versus choices like defining
Exactly.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and what she really wants is to be British and to be have friends and to be loved and to be. So I think that reflects with Sugarman and Little Sugar as well. They're
Yes.
a very similar relationship in a way where he's sort of not asking the right questions, and then both kids try and solve this problem quickly by stealing money. So
Yeah.
we're trying to get the money. So yeah, there's definitely all that put in it, but I think there was a very conscious decision in the filmmaking to sort of cut out a lot of exposition and cut out a lot of dialogue and really let it unfold.
Yeah, and I like that, the visual element. Can you talk a little bit, another John Ford connection? Because
Yeah.
I just, if it's John Ford and a Kurosawa, we can't not talk about them. But like, so he loved Ireland and it was a big influence visually, and he kept going there as much as he could.
Yeah.
And even though Scotland's not Ireland, like, it's close geographically, and you have a connection and you keep going there. And you keep
Yeah.
kind of bringing these elements there. And I just can't, I'm just curious about it, the influence and the motivation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Scotland has a strange filmic history because it's quite compared to America, it's quite dispersed in a way. There's very much this sort of train spotting and the drugs and the working class, and then you've got the sort of Rob Roy and the real mythic kind of big sort of Glen stories, and then Highlander, and then the really beautiful comic stuff like Gregory's Girl and Local Hero that I absolutely love. And but the landscapes never it's hardly apart from maybe sort of Rob Roy and stuff, it's not really photographed in how you would photograph a Western, really. It's not really widescreen, and Britain in general hasn't really been told much through those kind of Western eyes. So I just thought it was we were missing a trick there. Like period films coming out of Britain are all very costume drama. And I was
Hmm.
just thinking, why can't there be a period film that was more akin to the Western? It's the same people, it's the same.
Yeah.
I think it's something to do with maybe outsiders, and um, that's what I'm most interested in Slow West and Tornado are these sort of people that don't fit in, and they're gangs or they're roaming or they're just trying to survive, and they don't fit into the big house or they don't fit into the streets of London or they don't so
Yeah.
they're just sort of in the landscape roaming, and that's a kind of Western thing as well. And people are not quite evil, they're just trying to survive.
Yeah. Well, I have to wrap, but I love that you said that because the beauty of the landscape is something you put into it that we don't get to see
Yeah,
from Britain much. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
fun to see it. Thank you so much for your time,
Oh,
John. I really
thanks a
appreciate
lot.
it.